Hi everyone, thanks for joining me for Where I'm From number 41 with Katie. What are you reading? I'm reading a funny book, I'll Show Myself Out by Jessie Klein, who it's about motherhood and midlife, and I love enjoying it. And Katie's here, and I'm inviting her. And here she is. Hi.
Hi.
How are you? I I was expecting like some kind of glam music goddess. So this is the other incarnation of Katie. So
This is I woke up late and uh, have been with my kids and
yes. Uh-huh. Yes. I because all your pictures now are like you looking really like curated and hot, and I'm like, oh, okay. Who am I gonna get today? I'm ready. I'm
being a
ready for
mom.
either one.
That's okay.
Yes, it is. And I actually was just saying I'm reading this book, Jessie Klein's book, I'll Show Myself Out, which is
Okay.
about motherhood and
Yeah.
midlife. And I love it because she talks about the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, which is used in movies constantly, and how motherhood is a hero's journey. Um,
Yes. Yes.
and I
One
agree.
that yeah, one that's necessarily a part of the mainstream narrative
Right,
about motherhood.
right, right. Yes. And how,
Right?
she's listening to it being described and she's like, oh, yeah, I ignored the call, all the different things that you do, and that it's raising children is a hero's journey, right?
And it's not glamorous.
No, there's no lightsabers. She uses if you've seen Star Wars, you know what a hero's journey is. Um, no lightsabers. The villains aren't Darth Vader. The villains are usually in ourselves, which is
Right.
just really a lot more pedestrian.
I know, and like nobody tells you that yeah, that like you may be the villain you never knew you had within you.
Yep.
In
Yes.
mother,
Mhm. The
all of the
dragons you have to slay are often, your own internal or my own
oh,
internal dragons. So,
100%. There's nothing that has made me want to like be a better person and actively work towards like the healing of those wounds than motherhood. And then also like at the same
agree.
time, I it's really interesting how motherhood has also really spurned this like want and desire to create
Hmm.
too,
Hmm.
you know?
And be seen, I think, in a different, like you want to be seen and recognized for your contributions beyond keeping other people alive, which is a very worthwhile contribution. Um,
Right.
but yeah,
But both are important.
yes, for sure. I didn't have the bandwidth when my children were young. I was like, nope, I just got to do this. But as they grew older and I realized, oh, I do have space for myself, I had to redefine what self was. And I think that's also an exercise that people don't really talk about either. The self that I am had evolved.
Totally, totally. And I think, yeah, I mean, like when you take on the new self of like, you have to be this hero, you have to guide them through
Yeah.
life, existence, and emotions, and all of the difficulty. It's like, yeah, who are you then? Are you a leader and a guide, or are you still the person who wasn't sure you could lead? Like I just
Yeah.
all of those
Yeah.
things.
Fake it till you make it. Um, and now you're doing it from Copenhagen, which is
Well,
also
you know,
amazing.
yes, thank you. It's pretty wild. Like, so it's funny. Our conversation is actually catching me like a couple of days before I go back to Denmark. Right now, we're in the States visiting.
Oh.
Yeah, this is our first time back since we left, and it's been very interesting to like feel not a part of the regular life here, um, but also have this now new experience that also feels like home in some ways. So yeah,
Mhm.
it's been interesting. A lot of bittersweetness in this trip.
I'm sure. I'm sure
Yeah.
there are things that you're like, okay, bye. When you leave, but then, it is still who you are and a part of you. And, there are parts that are wonderful, and um, it's just, it's not one of those easy things. Whenever I read people like, oh, I'm going to leave, it's like, this country's still here and it's still doing what it's doing. It doesn't go away just because you've left. And
Right.
it's still heartbreaking and enraging and
Yes.
hopeful, I hope,
Yeah.
as well, So
Yeah.
you can't just like erase it. Like, this thing sucks, it's not how it
No,
works.
no, no, not at all. Not at all. All of the things are still present. And also, I mean, all of the things that have been happening since we've been gone are still so present um, in our minds and hearts and in our actions too. I mean, like, and it's interesting too, like when I am asked about the events, from Danish people and other expats from around the world, it's like, it's a weird thing to be like made into that representative of like news and culture in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's interesting just coming into the different opinions that people have of the United States as a person somewhat removed from it at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
and how to respond almost diplomatically,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Why do you think those Americans are doing that? Like you get asked that, like,
how
I
many
mean,
days or weeks do you
right,
have? Like,
right.
let's.
It's like, what do you, anyway, yeah, I have not lived in a foreign country, but I've spent some time and I've been asked those questions, and I always find it interesting depending on who's president and what's happening in the country. And, like my essential beliefs don't change, but people's perception of me as an American certainly does change based on what's happening in our country
Absolutely,
at that time.
absolutely,
So,
absolutely. Yeah.
so would you like to read your poem?
I would love to. Thank you so much for asking me to be a part of this,
Oh,
because
yes.
really it's such a moving experience, and like watching other people do this, and then yeah, there's so much. It was really a challenge in some ways, I think, because I don't think of myself as like a,
Me neither.
poetry writer
Me
anyway.
neither.
I write lyrics and content and
Yes. But
essays and
that's
things.
very, and congratulations on your single. I put
Thank
it
you.
in the little bio, but like that's very exciting. Sabrina, Katie, under her moniker, her music name, Good Kitty, has a single, Sabrina, which I had put in my stories. Congratulations. It must be really thrilling to have that out in the world. How long have you been working on it?
Thank you. Thank you so much. It is really thrilling to
Yeah.
have it. I mean, it has been, so my kids are young, right? And so both
Yes.
dedicated to that. And then also just, going through this huge transition and moving
Yeah.
to the country. But I've been working on this song and the other songs that are coming from the EP that I'm making since the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so, sorry, excuse me.
No, no problem.
Yeah, I've been working on them for almost 2 years. Yeah, and
Mm. It's so
uh,
fun to share something when it's been gestating for so long. So that's,
yeah,
I'm sure getting it out there was like, here, look, I have been doing this.
yeah,
I know I've been saying I've been doing it, but like, here's proof. I mean, maybe you don't struggle with that, but I do sometimes. It's like, I say I'm doing this thing. I really am doing this thing. But, it's like, they got to take your word for it until there's something to show or listen to or view. So, um,
totally, totally. It was kind of a practice of secrecy. Honestly, it was because it was
yeah.
it was just like I don't know. I had been like putting together a memoir like in the beginning of the pandemic, and I lost my dad in the beginning of the pandemic,
I'm sorry.
and so thank you. And it was like I realized that the focus, like that writing became difficult in a way that I didn't expect, and so like I turned back to music,
Mm-hmm.
and all of the things that all of the feelings that had kind of been like gestating just about like, like being a person in the world and going, like there's been so much healing, um, and also like additional trauma. I mean, it's just like what the ebb and flow of life.
That's true. There's
And I
no
was
like finish
oh,
line. Like you've processed it and you're like, okay, great. So no more new, you
right.
know. I'm good with this. Yeah, there's no finish
Right.
line. And I was gonna say too, isn't it interesting how different media or different modes of expression, like how one can work for you in a moment and one doesn't. And I think it's so liberating, and I encourage all creative people to believe that they can be creative in different media because you can. And it helps a lot. I think it
Yeah.
really does.
Completely. Like having, it's just like when, like when your pen runs out of ink,
Mm-hmm.
if you have another tool in your toolbox to pick up,
Mm-hmm.
and like it's huge, it's a gift, it's a privilege.
Mm-hmm.
um and I don't take it lightly, and I really was like, there's so much that I have to say, but I'm going to do it in the way that I've processed my feelings for a long time, which is through music. And so just all of these songs started coming out, and I was like, I have to, this feels like the urgency was there,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and and so it just had to happen. And so I'm really lucky that I've played with musicians before. I have a network of people
Yeah.
that I'm connected to. I was like, who wants to do this,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and it's been working out, and it's been a beautiful process. But I loved like doing this poem because, I mean, writing lyrics is
Yeah,
very, it's its own poetry, I guess, but
for
like
sure.
this format was really cool, and I love how much room there is, you know.
Yes, totally break the rules. That's what I tell people too. I mean, I think there is something fun about like being very strict about it at some point for people, but I
Mhm.
think also other people have anxiety about rules, so it doesn't work that way. For me, I like it, but some people are like, "Oh my God, like what if I want to do so?" It's fine, just do whatever. Like
Sure.
it's supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
Or I don't know if fun's the word, but enjoyable, like cathartic. So, it's not supposed to be a grind. So,
Yeah.
however that happens for people, I'm supportive of. So, I'm glad
Cool.
you found it. Good.
Yeah.
It's a big word. So if you're ready, I can
Okay.
just keep talking. So please go
Sure.
for it.
All right. Okay. Um, okay. I am from FM radio, from the back seat of a Buick and the piano bench. I am from the cement patio outside the sliding glass door, gray, cool to the touch, a playground for ants. I am from the tomato plants, the cicadas, whose swelling songs still serenade me on July evenings. I'm from diet soda pop and coupons, from Miriam and John. I'm from the big feelings feelers and the overanalyzers, from practice makes perfect and little white lies save lives. I'm from sky god and cloud heaven, and Adonai our God, and TV midnight mass on Christmas Eve. I'm from South Side and North Shore, junior whoppers and tic tacs. From the choir my grandfather toured with in college, the voice my father lost with his faculties. In the office, there were boxes and boxes of photographs, an unsorted mountain of memories to comfort our ghosts. I'm from those moments, curated in the ordinary, buried in ground and song.
Yay! White lies save lives. I haven't heard that one when I read it because I read the poem before I hear it so that I'm not like completely responding. I was like, that was like a gut punch. How do white lies save lives? Like, I need more insight into the what? And I can just
Yeah.
imagine as a child hearing that. And at least for me, if I heard that, I would be like, is this a white lie? Is this a good lie? Like having to parse like what's a good lie, what's a bad lie, you know.
And that's exactly why it was. I mean, I remember that moment. I remember that conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and it was the first like truly confusing moment I think in my childhood
Mm-hmm.
of like what does it mean that we can not tell people the truth?
Mm-hmm.
Like I just and I learned, I think, in that moment, like it was something silly. It was like my mom had told my dad that she was going to return something to the store and hadn't done it yet. It was still in her trunk. Right? Like
Mm-hmm.
inconsequential, you
Right.
know, like could have just been a conversation or
Right.
something. And she
Right.
didn't want me to say anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that moment, it was kind of like a switch
Mm-hmm.
happened, you know, like of just like, well, why would I not, you know, why would I,
Mm-hmm.
okay, but whose life, like what, you know,
Right.
it was just more questions. And I think it, you know, I think it comes from, you know, this idea that I grew up with of like, you know, we need to save other people from the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really, it's not a healthy thing.
No. And are you from
No.
Chicago? South Side, North Shore? Okay.
Yeah, so my dad's family is from the south side. My mom is from the north side, and I
Mm.
grew up north of the city on the North Shore. And you know, it's that sentence, you know, like about white lies sort of is very indicative of the area that I grew up in, I think, of like people putting on
For sure.
presentations
I would
and
agree with that. I went to Northwestern and my mom is from Wisconsin. So I have some like familiarity with that sort of Midwestern and particularly North Shore sort of like everything looks really great. You know, it's a beautiful place. Everyone is I don't know. I can't really I when I moved there, I was like, what is this place?
I know. I know.
It's very different from other play. I don't know. It's just and I had watched all those John Hughes movies and I was, you know, I thought they were sort of fanciful, but they really weren't that fanciful. Um, as a person who just rewatched Ferris Bueller's Day Off,
Yeah. Yeah, right. I
you
mean,
know, it's like, oh, yeah, a boy with that much money and privilege could kind of get away with it, you know,
right.
because there was this sort of turning away from any kind of inconvenient truth.
Right. And responsibility and accountability did not exist. It was like it's a historical narrative.
Yeah, it's funny watching it now because as a teenager, I was like, "Oh, this is completely out of bounds. None of this, whatever." And now I'm sort of like, "Okay, maybe he wouldn't like lead a parade, sure, but like all of the other, I don't know. It's kind of it's a more thought provoking movie than it was when I was a teenager. I was like, okay,
Right.
I get why the like vice principal is like so full of like anger because he
Rage.
just hates everybody that is at the school, you know,
Right.
and is so
Right.
tired of everything they get away with."
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Right. And it's fully right. Like let's reframe Ferris Bueller's Day Off as a love letter to white privilege. That's
It really is. I
basically
mean, watching
that.
it, you're just like, oh, you got to be a straight cis white boy to do, you know, for Ferris Bueller's Day Off to work. You got to be this guy. And his sister's so enraged by it. She feels the same thing, you know, even Cameron, who
Right.
is these things as well, but struggles with mental health. So he's not,
Right.
you know, I mean, so it's just, yeah, it is. It's a love letter to white privilege. So
Right.
it's we got off track from your poem, but I I'm good at that. But yeah, white lies save lives. That's like a T-shirt like that I don't want, but
Yep.
um,
And
but I
yeah,
really
sure,
it's so
sure
evocative,
trying to take off for a very long time.
right? Internal tattoo. And I
Right.
think in it there's this kind of like complicity like that you're in it too. And I think I just could feel it so much, like this small Katie who's like, okay, but what does this mean for me?
Right.
And how do you unpack that? And so it's just, and I
Right.
felt that through the whole poem, these kind of like, I thought it was, I enjoyed the sort of mix of these things that are enjoyable and fun, but also the weight of growing up in a world that doesn't make sense,
Yeah.
and trying to make sense of it through music and words and
Right.
experiences and
Yeah. And that's the thing too. I mean, like when I was like, how would like my emotional heritage be described? Um, and like it was like big feeling feelers and over analyzers. And it so much of, I think, like when you don't have the words to describe the feelings, but they overwhelm you.
mm-hmm.
It looks a certain way, right? Um, and when you don't, like, it's hard to, when you're not used to putting the feelings to words, it's hard to pass on the language
Mm-hmm.
to describe the feelings that are
Mm-hmm.
normal for any kid to
Mm-hmm.
feel, you know. And then those messages of being able to convey or not able to convey the truth, they get pushed into the mix. It becomes kind of a toxic cocktail, you know. And
Yeah, and so much of parenting, we're told, is to mirror our children's feelings, and to say, oh, you seem angry, or you seem frustrated, or you seem sad, or whatever. But like, if you don't have the words, you certainly can't mirror something you don't understand. And that's the sentence, like, I didn't have the words for my feelings, is something that I now hear with some regularity. But it's not something I ever heard, you until fairly recently. And I remember the first time I heard it, I was like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
I think, and if you don't have grown-ups mirroring your feelings for you, or showing you their feelings and explaining to them why they're feeling that way, it's difficult as a child to understand. And for me, and I hear some in your poem of this, not to feel like something's wrong with what we're feeling. Like,
Hmm.
why am I having these big feelings? What are they? What are they? Why? And how do I process them or move through them or understand them?
Right.
Um,
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting, like, those ideas have been formative, but they're not, it's like, I don't know, when you become an adult and you have your own kids and you go through therapy and like you work on yourself and try to dismantle the ideas of um what doesn't work, what doesn't function, and what does.
what you don't want to
I'm
pass on and what you do.
right. I mean, I think I'm very lucky in a lot of ways to have been, like, given a lot of gifts, but also at the same time, I think that we all have these things that we have to confront,
Mm-hmm,
about
mm-hmm,
where we come from,
mm-hmm,
that we don't want to call home,
mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah, yeah. And I think so often, I mean, I think, this is kind of every generation thinks about that. And I think, for our generation, obviously, it's been a lot of thinking about intergenerational trauma, but not having that word till fairly recently. But thinking about that and those traits and that we do and don't want to pass on. For my parents, it was more about, okay, how do we buy a house? How do we, feed the children? How do we give them those kinds of things that we never had? And so I do think most parents are trying, I think the vast majority of parents are trying their best and are trying to give their children things they didn't have. Um, and and I know that you can have compassion for your parents without having children, but I definitely having children has definitely given me a different level of compassion. Like, oh wow, like you're even when you're digging deep all the time, you still can't do everything. Like, so
Right.
we're trying.
We're all there are too many moments, you know, that I mean, like, yeah, we're all trying our best, and for the places that need improvement, we work on them actively. I mean, like, what more can we do?
Right.
Like, yeah. Yeah, and I have so much compassion for my parents and my grandparents and their before them, who really just did everything they could within their means to make things better for the next generation. And also to know, like, the active failures too,
Mm-hmm.
of
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Like it's okay. I know I'm not doing it all right. I feel like that's, that's, that helps. Just like,
Yes.
well, I'm not perfect. So,
No, I'm not, and I don't expect I'm not. Nobody is. I don't expect that from you. you
mm-hmm.
know.
Yes, I know it's not achievable no matter how hard you try, because I really did try really hard. Every fiber of my being to be perfect. So I mean, it's not happening. So I can speak from experience. Uh, yeah. So
Yeah.
any other, I don't know if this applies, the last sentence, since we sort of keep talking about parenthood, and in the last, it made me cry when I read it. The last line of this essay, she says, a mother's heroic journey is not about how she leaves, but about how she stays. And after reading the whole, because in a hero's journey, usually they leave, they go on, it's like the Odyssey, on that kind of, like, you go on this epic, and ours is internal and staying and being there every day. And um, like you said, it's not glamorous, but it is transformative.
Right. It's interesting. I mean, I read that. I remember reading. It was like excerpted, right? And
Yes,
it
it was.
appeared.
Mm-hmm.
It
In
appeared
the
somewhere.
cut, maybe I was trying to
Maybe,
remember where. Yeah,
yeah, a few months ago, and
yeah.
I remember feeling at that last sentence. It was kind of funny. I was like, but what about the people who don't? Like, what about the people who don't or can't? You know, because their choices are also like circumstances. And I was like, maybe motherhood is a hero's journey, but also maybe it's not,
It's not for
like,
everyone.
right.
I mean, the same journey isn't for everyone. And I think that it works particularly within the body of that essay, because she talks about how often she wants to leave and how she's not really going to, but
Right.
how we don't, how it's difficult for us to accept that being a parent, and being a mother specifically, they're not always, floating on air, smelling like lavender. They're not mommy influencers. Like, there's a lot of frustration and sneakiness and difficulties, and that's difficult for a lot of people to accept, and it
Yes.
hasn't been easy for her either.
Right.
And so I think at the end of that sort of conversation, she's saying, okay, I'm staying. This is my hero's journey. It is her hero's journey. And yes, there are people who don't stay and can't stay, and that's a different one. And
Yeah.
hopefully those people write a memoir that I can read.
Yeah.
Because because I think people should share their journeys and what their hero's journey is. I just like kind of the idea of normalizing, like, there's all kinds of different journeys and they're all valid.
Yeah.
And you don't have to go like conquer the world or change it, which I think was more of a girl job. Like, we weren't going to conquer the world. That's cute of you, but we're going to change it. We're going to save it. Save it. Um, no, just doing you is a hero's journey. And you can do that whether you're a mother or not,
Yeah.
or a
I mean,
parent or not. Like, that's not necessary to do it.
Right.
And it's not to say that you have to be a parent to have that journey. You don't.
Nope. Nope. Yeah.
Because
And
for all those people who can't or don't want to be parents, you're seen. You know, like I am not one of those people who thinks everyone should have kids. Absolutely not.
yeah, I
You know those people, like, when are you having kids? And you're like, maybe never, leave them alone.
it's one of those experiences that, like, yeah, I mean, you just don't really know what it's going to be like until you are now one, and now you must venture forth, into this new unknown.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and it's funny because I think that, I one of the things that I always wanted to be was a parent. And
Me too.
I as my friend group has kind of, like, started getting closer to the, like, will I or won't I only have this much time left, or I'm not
Yep.
sure, or I'm on the fence. And, like, I tell people who are on the fence and really want input, you know, like, this will change your life.
Mm-hmm.
This will change your life. And if you don't know if you want your life to be changed, that is only the decision that you
Mm-hmm.
can make
Mm-hmm.
for yourself. And it's okay
Mm-hmm.
to not make it,
Yes.
you know?
100%. Yes. Yes. And don't be one of those people who's like, I'm not going to let it change me. Just don't, just spare yourself the pain. You know, don't do it if you want to be one of those people, like, yeah. I
Yeah,
had a lot of those people. Not going to let it change me. Like, okay. I mean, I wasn't so like hype on myself that I wasn't open to change. So it was like, I mean, I said this in an earlier poem with Tria because she was asking me about my input thoughts about parenthood. Like, I was ready for change. I was not bitter or resentful to step away from my work. I wanted a break. I needed a break. I needed a change. I couldn't do it anymore. I'd
sure.
hit the wall. So it's not going to like save you, none of that either. But I wasn't, I wasn't like, oh, if only I hadn't had kids, I would be, some kind of something. I was like, if I hadn't had kids, I'd still be here feeling like shit, like that wasn't, I mean, no. And so, I was in a good place for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's such a personal decision. And, I think
Yeah. So you don't
there's
think the
so many,
government should be involved?
huh? Hmm.
It's a
Hmm.
personal decision, really? It's like, seems like the most obvious,
Huh.
like, of the personal decisions, it seems like almost the most obvious one. She is, as we're talking about how it changes you, and not just emotionally, but physically changes
Physically,
you, you know?
biologically.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's not some like thing, like you just do it and then you give your kid up for adoption. I love how they always act like that's such a piece of cake. Like, oh yes, I will definitely just carry this child to term and give it up for adoption, and that will be no big.
That is,
You're
yeah,
like,
not a
what?
legitimate, no.
No,
Yeah,
I'm not an oven. It's not a dozen cookies that I'm just gonna give to my neighbors. It's more complicated.
right. This is a human that you just
Yeah, yeah,
want me to birth for
right,
capital. I don't like,
right,
oh,
right.
anyway, that is a whole other conversation
It
for
is, but I
another
just felt
day.
like it was too like, here we are talking about it's personal. So I know that no one watching this is like, what? But sometimes I
The
just
personal is political. The
yeah,
political is personal.
yeah, it should be a choice. Um,
100%.
so any last thoughts? Because I have to like make myself wrap up. Or I just talk to people. Just keep talking because
I
I
know.
like
Yeah.
to
What are you
have
doing this afternoon?
conversations.
Let's just.
Yeah, it's like I know we all have things to do. So
Yes.
yeah, you have to probably enjoy your last moments of this this great nation before you go back to Copenhagen. Um, Anyway, so any other, thank you for joining me. I'm so glad that you were able to. you're a person
Thank
that I
you
see
so
on
much.
social media, and we interact in our social media way. And it's very gratifying to meet people and like actually interact with them beyond, haha, I love that meme or
Right.
whatever, you know.
Right. Yeah, and I
Um,
really appreciate you. Like this has been so nice talking to you. I feel like I already know you, to a
right.
certain
Same.
extent,
Yeah.
and it feels just like a conversation with a friend.
I
And
know. It's really nice.
yeah, and I appreciate you asking me to do this. It was like really it was a fun exercise and just an interesting way to think about who I am and where I've been and why and where I come from. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you for joining me, Katie, and thanks for being brave. Because I know it takes, for some people, it doesn't. Very few people I've realized through this experience. Very few people are like, I'm not nervous, don't care, it's all great. Most people have a little bit of performance anxiety, but I think it's also just the vulnerability of sharing ourselves, even though most people want others to share themselves vulnerably. It's a little bit. So I appreciate your bravery and for joining me. So it was
Thank you.
lovely meeting you and talking with you.
Lovely to meet you. Yes.
Okay,
Have a great rest of your day.
you too. Bye, Katie.
Bye, Allison.